What's going on, guys? On today's episode of Forward Progress, I talk with Mike Peters, wide receivers coach at SUNY Brockport. He talks a little bit about the lessons he learned working for Lance Leipold, how to build player relationships, stepping out of his comfort zone, and what he learned in his time at North Dakota State. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some Forward Progress. Mike, what's going on, man? Thanks for jumping on the podcast today. How's everything going?
Going great in the thick of recruiting and getting ready for spring ball, and everything's good over here in Brockport, New York.
Yeah, your guys' recruiting, D3 recruiting is a little bit of a different beast, right? You just grinding away till
It
basically
is.
fall camp and seeing who shows up, right?
It's tough, but at the same time, with the consistent winning that Coach Mangoni and the staff have done here the last 15 years has helped. We were able to get our recruiting pretty much done just around spring when spring ball starts. Not there's always that recruiting up to fall camp happens,
Yeah.
but this is a really good setup here in the process in which these coaches, Coach Potter, our recruiting coordinator, and Coach Mangoni, just delegating and knowing where we got to go to get the kids that have gotten us to this point, winning 8 games consistently for
Yeah.
10 years. So
Yeah. No, it helps when you have that consistency level there. What's kind of your guys's what's your roster sizes, especially because at that level you can see so many different variations of roster size. What do you guys normally carry? How many kids do you bring in per class? What's your targets?
I mean, we're 110. We're not a 200 uh, player organization, just because you really can't get to know them. You can't get to know your
Hmm.
players. Uh, it's there's teams that have the JV squad separate from varsity, and we aren't that.
Yeah.
Our if we have 2 or 3 JV games, which are awesome for development. You can just see the process of, okay, like, I'm not playing on Saturday, but I get to play on a Monday, and you treat it the same thing as game. The every part of a game day stays the same, and so you get to develop, and you get to go back and watch that film in the off season with those freshmen and make sure that they're taking the proper steps in their process. So instead of it being like, okay, like, we're gonna throw mud at a wall and see what sticks, like,
Yeah.
that's just not how we operate, which I really like. I think that allows you to really stack days with the guys that are in your room, where you don't. Some days, if you had a room of 30 guys, you're not going to know who's coming back tomorrow.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
you don't know you don't know the in depths of their off the field things they have going on, and which we talked about narrative a little bit in the last podcast. But I just think you can't build that relationship when you have so many players in your program. So
Yeah.
Coach Mangoni does a great job of that.
I've always felt the same way because I've been at some of those D3 schools where they're telling you got to bring in 160, 180 kids, and it's like, and then they're telling you got to retain, and I'm talking administrations. It's obviously not a lot of head coaches want to do that, but administrations are
Yeah.
telling you that, and they're saying you got to bring in these numbers and you have to find a way to retain them. And it's, how do you expect us to do that without being able to you can't build relationships with all these kids, but then you want us to retain them. What's the draw for those kids to want to come back if they just feel like they're another number on a roster? So I've always, I love, like, and it's obvious you guys have been able to have sustained success there. So I think that's definitely a big piece of the recipe, is being able to have a team where it's consistent and you don't have a ton of numbers, where guys can actually get to develop those relationships between players and coaches and people on the team, and who's going to be around from year to year. So that's always nice. Now, what
Just
was it like? Because you played at Lake Forest. What was it like when you guys were there? Because that's a little bit of a bigger roster, right?
right now, when I was there, it was probably 115, 120. I mean, again, space was limited.
Yeah.
Since I was there, Lake Forest is way better than when I was playing. I was part of the foundation, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
Uh, I was part of Coach Cat's first recruiting class. Young, energetic, tough love head coach.
Yeah.
Learned a ton from him, and just my process of getting into coaching. And there's a lot of things that I learned from him that I didn't know until 10 years after the fact. And then everyone says that when you're coaching and you're playing, like, oh, you're going to thank me one day. Well, there's lessons that I learned within his program when we were 2-8, and then went 3-7, and then went 8-2, and then went 8-2. And then I don't know if they went anything less than 8-2 since I graduated.
Yeah. I don't think they
Um,
have. They've been pretty solid ever since.
and just the sustained success there too, of what he's done at a private school with, in Chicago, in a good conference. I think the Midwest Conference is still a competitive one with Monmouth and U Chicago. And
Hmm.
I'm a prideful alum because I love to see them winning. I keep track on Saturdays after our games, and
Right.
trying to keep building that Forrester coaching pipeline. That's the biggest thing that is fun to see other guys that have graduated after me kind of get into the profession and skyrocket to, whether it's Ethan, who was at Boston College as an O-line GA, or Caleb
Hmm.
Moore down at Georgia Southern. It's just cool to see guys that are just being able to take that step and run with it.
Right, for sure. Now you brought up being a private because you've worked both private schools and now you're at a state school.
Mhm.
What are the advantages of being at a state school versus private? Like, do you see do you feel a difference as a coach there in terms of recruiting or how things are budgeted or anything like that between private and state schools?
I would tell you for sure this is my first experience. Like, I really leaned heavy on our recruiting coordinator, Coach Potter, because this is my first state school and it is completely different with recruiting, because we have such a, I guess you would say, a brand in the state of New York. I mean, going into high schools, there was people stopping me in the hallway seeing the Brockport logo. I went to Brockport, and then a guidance counselor, I went to Brockport, and then telling the recruits that I had such a phenomenal time there. I'm like, okay, well, you guys just did my job for me.
Yeah, right.
But to to that point, our footprint is not in California, in Arizona. It is in New York. Like, we want
Mm,
to recruit New York, New York City, Long Island. Like, we want to go get players that are in our state, and keep them home. Even if
mm-hmm.
it is in Central New York. State tuition obviously is cheaper.
Yeah.
That thing too. That helps. Um, the one thing that I guess the benefit of being at a private school where you got to go recruit out of state all the time, and you have to go to the Californias, the Texases, and the Dade County in
Yep.
Florida. That's great experience, one, recruiting, but you now can go and try to find what fits the
Hmm.
school. Like, how do you find the match, not only for the player to the school, but the school to the player. um, and just trying to find guys that want to come to New York out of state. There's been a couple in this class, but there's the advantage of a state school over a private school. I would say is that you're going to know your price of what school is, especially with the whole FAFSA thing going on with a lot of Division III schools. That's kind of
Yeah.
tough.
Right.
I don't envy the private schools right now, because you're recruiting not knowing exactly what's coming
Right.
back.
And it sounds like a lot of them still have nothing back from, like, nobody's gotten anything up to this point, which
Yeah.
obviously, kids want to make decisions and things like that. Do you feel like because of that FAFSA delay, like how often do you guys compete in with? Because I know obviously the whole SUNY system, there's a good number of schools and state schools in New York. Do you compete in recruiting with a lot of private schools, or is it mostly state schools that you're dealing with?
Well, we have St. John Fisher down the road. There's some crossover there. Hobart, some crossover with some high schools that are down in Section 4, specifically my area. I've had a couple, where we're competing for the same kids, but the brand, the winning, I would say that a lot of times that we're able to have success with bringing them here.
Hmm.
The price tag deal right now is just, I think, is an advantage to any state school in any
Yeah.
state right now, just because of the FAFSA. And it's it's just made it an interesting dynamic in this process for kids. I don't envy the kids and the parents right now, because they're
Yeah.
trying to
Right.
make a decision. And is it going to be the right decision, not knowing blindly what you're walking into? So,
Right. Right.
you also just want to be honest in the process too with the kids. Like, listen, this is what the price is. Like, for us at least, we know what it is, and it helps us to our advantage, kind of like what you were referring to.
Yeah. Awesome. So, what got you into coaching in the first place? What do you love about it that kept you going? Because you've obviously been a couple different places. You've been at D3, FCS, Division 1. So you bounced around. Obviously, to do that, you got to have a love for it. What got you into it? What do you love about this profession that keeps you in it?
It kind of goes back to playing at Lake Forest. I was coming out of high school. I didn't really have help in my recruiting process, to be honest with you. I kind of was like, I'm going to go play college football. And I don't think there were a lot of people that thought it could happen. I wasn't a great player, very average player. But my point is that just getting that opportunity at Lake Forest to be on the team and then try to work towards a starting spot, and falling into one on a bad team at the time at 2-8. The process of what Coach Cat was instilling, I was like, this is to be a part of a rebuild of a 2-8, 3-7, 8-2, 8-2. And then to have coaches like him and to have, coaches like my position coach, Coach Noble, who passed away this past summer. He just was very relationship based. And I'd never seen that before. I was so used to kind of transactional. And I was like, this guy like gets it. Like I was like, if I could do this somehow, like I want to do this. Because at the time I was a junior, and then I finally committed to being a communications major. I was uncommitted for 2 years. And then what wound up happening was I was a comm major. I had no idea what I'm going to do with that. Coach Cat had my end of the year senior meeting. He goes, listen, like we need a receivers coach for the spring. Why don't you come out and try out coaching? Why don't you see if it's something that you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Coaching my teammates was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do, because, you for 3.5 years, you're with these guys and you're hanging out on the weekends, but now they have to trust you that you know what you're talking about well enough to put them in a position to be successful. And it was hard at first, that trust. So doing that, I was like, if I can do this, I really want to try to get an opportunity to try it and see for the next couple of years, can I make this a profession? Can I climb the ladder? Like I've seen, you see people on, people's stories. So I had one opportunity, and it was through an alum, Coach Langhoff down at McMurray College, which is actually closed now.
Yeah.
He was a Lake Forest alum. He's at Beloit College now as the offensive coordinator. But he gave me my first opportunity. Coach Langhoff and Coach Douglas, two of the best humans in this profession, intentional teachers for young coaches, and went down to Jacksonville, Illinois, McMurray College, in the same little town as Illinois College. And
Yep.
we didn't have much to sell but relationships. I mean, literally, it was a gravel parking lot. The
Yeah.
place was hanging on by a thread. And Coach Douglas always talked about, we are a process-driven place. We are not a microwave process. We are a slow cook process. And well, I was only there 10 months, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot that I didn't realize until after I left. And if anyone that's listening to this has a chance to work for Chris Douglas down at Lyons College in Arkansas, do it. He will put you in a position to be successful as a young coach, because he understands you got to teach. You got to be an avid and intentional teacher. So, and then I was only there for 10 months, and the year after I left, they went 8-2. So it was cool to see the success just happen in a place that a lot of people haven't had that success. So.
Yeah, right. Now, after that, you went to Concordia, Chicago, correct?
Yep. So
and then
sorry,
you were,
didn't mean to cut.
no, you're fine. Wide receivers coach there, because you were coaching tight ends at McMurray, is that correct?
So I was both. So I had receivers and I had tight ends. You had 9 hats there.
Yeah.
Receivers, tight ends, equipment manager,
Yeah.
I painted the field. I remember a quick story, but I remember being up in the press box and looking down at the field that I painted for the first game, and like the ticks on the sideline were all messed up. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired. It looks awful, but it was funny to look back on, because we played on a grass field, and that's what it was. And
Yeah, right.
You were scrubbing with OxyClean out of the white jerseys. You're hoping we didn't wear white jerseys on grass, but it was cool. So no, I went up to Concordia, Chicago, had an opportunity to be a graduate assistant with John Preston, who was a teammate of mine at Lake Forest, and he was the D-line GA. I was the receivers GA. Got my opportunity to earn a master's degree, which I never thought I was going to do, because school was never really a strength of mine.
Yeah.
I was able to get a master's in sports administration, a 2.5-year program. And so I was there for 3 seasons at Concordia, Chicago. Worked for a guy named Randy Ari, who was really successful at Saginaw Valley, went on to be like the Brian Kellys when he was at Grand Valley.
Yep.
I worked for a guy named Jim Kiernan, who's a high school offensive coordinator at Shaker Heights right now in Cleveland. Just a very innovative offensive coordinator, guy that when I work for him, and I hope he listens to this, when I work for him, we butted heads, and he'll love this. There would be times, because I was a young 22 coach, I'd get text messages. He made me put my phone in the middle of the floor of his office when we'd meet. And I was like, I'm not a child. So I used to hate him for that. but I have the best relationship with him now, and one that I can pick up the phone and call and just lean on him in times where like, hey, like what do I do in
Hmm.
this situation? Whether it's interview process, whether it's with a player, whether it's anything.
Yeah.
So that experience at Concordia was invaluable because between Randy, Ari, and Mike Jussick and Eric Finney, who's at Iowa West, just those beginning years really had a lot of relationships that
Yeah.
I still stay in touch with guys.
Yeah. Eric Finney actually played at Illinois when I was there, so I know
Okay,
him somewhat decently. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but just another connection there that we didn't know we had apparently.
dude, that's so fun. One of the best dudes. There's a I know when he was at Illinois, there was like some ESPN deal where he would like answer some crazy questions. I don't know. He was one of the best people to work with because for being such a high level player,
Yeah.
like he applied for the GA job and I went through the resume. I was like, there's no way this guy wants to actually be here.
Yeah.
And
Right.
his thing was I would rather coach football than push coffee.
Yeah.
And so for him, we had an office we had literally our office was in the basement of a house. Like there's no way to met regulations of what it should have been, but we all had our little corner, and it's funny to look back on those experiences because I would love to go back and see that house if it's still
Yeah.
in
No
there.
doubt. No doubt.
But yeah, Eric Finney, man, good people. He's a rising coach that's for sure going to be big time.
Yeah.
He'll hate me for even saying that because he's very humble, but he knows football and he's a great people's person and he just
Yeah.
gets kids, so he'll be successful.
And then so after that, went to Buffalo, right?
Yeah,
GA,
so
which is home for you.
yeah, so the best actually now this is Eric Finney story. We'll go back to Eric. So I'm working with Eric, and now I don't really know anyone Division I football players at the time. I didn't play D1. I only knew Division III, and so when I met Eric, real cool dude, and I asked him like, hey, like how can I reach out to like these big time coaches and trying to learn from like would they respond? He goes, you're making them out to be like not like real people, like they're humans, like they
Yeah.
all had they all had their own story.
Yep.
So like you just got to look up their story. Where were they at? Like
Yeah.
shoot them an email. And so that there was an off season, I'm pretty sure would have been uh, maybe spring of like 16, I believe it was the before I left before my last season at Concordia. I had sent 150 emails out to Division I receivers, coaches, and I probably got 10 responses. I was shocked to get even 10.
Hmm.
And like Keith Williams from Nebraska came back. That was like, the biggest thing because, at that time he still is now he's with the Saints, but that was huge. I was like, wow, like he sent me a 4-word email back. Thanks for reaching out. I'm like, this is amazing. But Rob Ianello, actually, who's now I believe he's the chief of staff at Kansas under Coach Leipold, he was the receivers coach at Buffalo. He reached back and said, come in when you're home in Buffalo. And I thought it was the coolest thing. I
Yeah.
went in there, we talked shop for hours. I was there all day. He, pretty much anything I wanted to look at and talk about, we talked about, I bounced ideas off of him and what he thought. And mind you, Rob was at Notre Dame and was the receivers coach with Charlie Weis at Kansas. He's been around guys like Golden Tate. So like
Hmm.
to be able as a Division III guy sit and to have that conversation was amazing. Just to even have the conversation. And at the end of it, he asked me when I was graduating from my master's at Concordia. I had not a clue what he was doing. I had no idea. Like I
Yeah.
was
Right.
naive.
Yeah.
And I graduated December of 2017. And I drive back to Buffalo because I can't afford to live in Chicago off of 7 grand.
Right.
So, and I was out of a job technically because of graduation.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
went back to Buffalo, moved in with my parents at 25, as everyone loves to do. And I'm in my parents' kitchen and I get a phone call from Rob Ianello asking if I'd be interested in the receivers GA. And I'm like, it just numb. I'm like, I don't even know. I hadn't really talked to him. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, would love to. Could you, where are you at right now? He thinks I'm still in Chicago. So I was like, I'm actually in Buffalo. And he goes,
Yeah.
could you be here like tomorrow? So I went in and I gave it my best shot and I didn't get hired,
Hmm.
but I was devastated. I was like, man, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And a few days later, after I didn't get hired, Andy Koltanecki, who's now the OC at Penn State, he called me and asked if I wanted to come on as a running backs quality control. which was a volunteer position.
Mm.
They weren't going to be able to pay me, but so for a year, I wound up working with the running backs with Coach Koltanicki, and it was awkward. It was different. I never worked with anything inside the box. I mean, I
Mhm.
was so being able to learn from Coach and learn from kind of his process of rising to where he was at from Whitewater to Buffalo.
Yeah.
So I was the running backs as a volunteer for a year, and when I was there, I was serving at a steakhouse called Giancarlo's Steakhouse for so I'd go to Buffalo at whatever hour in the morning, and then I would go and leave right at a certain point in practice so I can get to my shift on time down the street at the steakhouse, work until close, go home, shower, get up, do it again, and it was worth it
Yeah.
because the coaching staff they saw it, they respected it, they think, and Coach Leipold was really trying avidly, towards that year point to get me some sort of compensation,
Mm.
and I want to move into an off the field role as like an academic advisor, with football. So I actually got to make the schedules and do things for our players that it really had nothing to do with football, but had everything to do with the conversations that needed to be had about, priorities and, what are the things that need to get done so you can be successful academically, so you can go do the thing that you're blessed with physically.
Mhm.
And so I remember having conversations, with like Jared Patterson when he was a sophomore. Now he's with the Chargers. He had a hell of a career at Buffalo, running back. Charlie Jones, who's now at the Bengals. At the time he struggled, and he's in the NFL. He's okay. Like he's
Yeah.
struggling academically, and but my point is like having those hard conversations about what do we got to do to move forward? Like how do we get you to where you need to get to? And that was a learning experience for me as a
Yeah.
coach
Right.
because
Yeah.
no matter what level you're at, you need to have those conversations. You need to have
Right.
a process to give your players
Right.
so they can be
Yeah.
successful.
Those conversations aren't easy because a lot of
Mhm.
times you're talking to them about things they don't want to hear about. You're telling them things they don't want to hear that they need to
Yeah,
improve upon. And especially if it's not football related, they're even less inclined sometimes to want to receive that information. So being delicate with it and figuring out because you don't want to if a kid's struggling academically, you got to be very careful because you don't want that kid to think you're calling him dumb. You
yeah.
want you want him to know that you're trying to help him, but he's got to do X, Y, and Z to get to that point. So yeah, no, having those difficult conversations and gaining that experience there is got to be super valuable.
I look back on it and I just look at just in the moment didn't realize how important those 6 months were because it was a very short stint with being with academics because there was then an opportunity to get into an on-field graduate assistant spot, which I'll get to that here in a second. But what I learned most from the academic side was that when you take away like their physical abilities as players, like you got to be able to listen.
Mhm.
Like you have to be able to just sometimes they're not going to just if you ask just say what is wrong, they're probably not going to tell you. Like
Yeah,
you got to ask questions that are going to bring out what is wrong. Like there was times with players I would never name them, but like just things off the field that are drastically affecting them between the ears, which are then affecting their play. And then if we don't know that as coaches, I think that we're missing out on massive amount of potential to be
hmm
able to help. And it's like the switchboard of it's you got to make sure that everything is going fine internally before physically anything could happen on the field. So that role proved to me that it really starts with the relationship and asking the questions. And so and then
absolutely.
taking that forward and into the coaching deal. But so that was a six
So
month deal. And so
so and you were there a total of 4 years overall,
yeah,
correct?
yeah.
So was it all with Coach Leipold, or was there another coach at all that you worked for there?
So right after the academic opportunity, that was from I think January 19 to April, and then I had an opportunity to be the linebackers GA, and I GA'd for Chris Simpson, who's now the linebackers coach at Kansas.
Okay.
And the importance of that role for me was I had not a clue about defense. I didn't know run fits. I didn't know the differences, really in anything defense. But I
Yeah.
knew the process of being a GA because I was doing it already as a volunteer, technically with Visio, and
Right.
just how Coach Leipold operated. And I'll never forget this. And I'm invaluable. It's, I'm indebted to him for this, but he called me in, sat down in his office, and I was like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I know what he was going to say. He goes, we have an open linebacker GA. Would you be interested? I'm like, coach, I never coached it. And then wound up, he pretty much looked me in the face like, I believed in me when I didn't believe in myself pretty much, and said that you're going to do a great job. The process. And I left that office. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I just got myself into. But two 2 years later, 5 years later, I'm a better coach from those 2 years with Coach Simpson. And I
Yeah.
appreciate their patience, because it wasn't probably easy, having a receivers guy working with linebackers, but it was one of the best growth opportunities that I had, because
Yeah.
now I can see the game
Yep.
holistically, and I understand why leverage is, and
Yep. I've always
certain
felt
weapons.
that I don't care who you are, I don't care what position you coach, something in my opinion, you got to do as a coach is you got to coach on the other side of the ball. Like the best experience for me was, I started offense, went from offense to defense back and forth as I was a GA, and then eventually became a defensive coordinator. And up until then, I'd spent a lot of time as an offensive GA. I was a QC or quality control at Illinois on the offensive
Mm,
side. And I went from QC at Illinois to defensive coordinator at St. Joe. And
mhm,
it just completely changes the way. And then eventually, 5 years down the road, became an OC again. And it was, had I not been a DC for that 5 year span, I wouldn't have been ready to be an OC and truly understood it, because seeing that other perspective, seeing how the other position coaches it, how the other side of the ball game plans it, is so invaluable that even just a year, doing that
mhm.
for a year, it will completely change the way you look at whatever side of the ball you feel most comfortable with and want to get to eventually. It's such a valuable experience to get to that other side.
1,000%. Like, especially, it was just talking with a fullback for us that just graduated at Brockport, and he's a fullback. What's a position that relates to that? Probably linebacker. Like, just the
Sure.
crossover, like running backs, linebackers, receivers,
Right.
DB, O line, D line. Like, in for the benefit for, and I GA'd with Adam Fran, who's an Ithaca guy, Ithaca quarterback. He's from the same town as me. He was a quarterback, but he, working on defense with the DBs. So we had the best scout team in America. I'll stand on a table and say that in 2020. But it was really because we could coach the offense like an
Yeah.
offensive
Right.
coach. It was our opportunity to be able to go out and coach the positions we really loved,
Yeah.
and go and try to roast the defense and
Yeah.
piss off our defensive coordinator. But in the same time, we were getting better when we weren't in that scout team, because we were learning
Yep.
all the technique and all those things. So
Yep.
if there's anything for a young coach, do it early. Like, do
Yeah.
it when you're 21, 22, because when you're 26, 27, it's really hard to swallow your pride and do it,
Yeah.
because now you're in an uncomfortable world of what you know and what you don't.
Right.
And it changed, yeah, like you said, coach, it's changed how you look at the game, and the game slows down. And
Yep.
now I can coach the receivers here at Brockport about, understanding that what the deficiencies in certain coverages are. Like,
Yep.
defenses are okay to give up certain pass concepts because they can't guard everything,
Right.
right? And so that's something that's just a little thing that I learned. But you asked a question specifically about being, if I was at Buffalo for the second staff. I was it was interesting to be a part of the staff changeover. It would have been May of 21. Coach Leipold obviously had the opportunity at Kansas. Super happy for him and his family. And I'm from Buffalo,
Yeah.
so
Right.
you know there, I was out of my GA years. There wasn't any opportunities there, uh, and so I would bet on myself to stay with the new staff, and interviewed to be a full-time QC, and I got the job. Coach Mo hired me, and I was ecstatic. Full time, making more than $10,000 a year. I was like, I don't even know what to do. And be transparent, cried tears of joy, because it's like, finally, for the first time in your life, you have you know um, salary. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting transition. The different regime, culture wise, and the process that we had under Coach Leipold was awesome.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about how things operated, and he really is a general manager. I
Well,
mean,
I'm gonna quiz you on some of that here, because
uh,
that was gonna be my next question. Obviously, Coach Leipold,
yeah,
super established, talented head coach, able to build programs, had a great run at Whitewater with, I think it was what, 5 national championships, was
Mhm.
able to get Buffalo to a high level and parlayed that into Kansas. And now he's put Kansas on the map, so to speak. I
Yeah.
mean, from really just a doormat school in the Big 12 to a team that's competing for year in, year out. Like you think about them now, right?
Yeah.
What is it that makes him, you had a chance to see him up close. And then
Mhm.
obviously you saw another coach, and obviously there's differences in how he does it. What is it that makes him so good at building programs? Because he's done it everywhere he's been. He's been able to build a successful program. What does he do that's so unique or that's able to help him do that?
He's mastered the ability to have a long vision, but also be very detailed in the present. Like he's thinking 5 years from now, and he's planning 5 years from now, and then he's also making sure that the details in the present don't go unnoticed. Whereas a lot of people will look, okay, I want to win right now, but you're not thinking about next year and how that affects it.
Hmm.
So whether it's your recruiting and or the budget or anything like that, being in those staff meetings and sitting along the back wall and just like taking notes and like listening to how he thinks was really uh transformational for any of us that were fortunate to be in that room. I GA'd with a lot of guys and volunteered with some people, and I'm sure they've taken similar lessons that I have, just about what's important. Don't let details slip. Like it's bigger than, like, if you let one thing slip, it's gonna leave a crack in a foundation. And that's kind of what I watched him build. I mean, I wasn't there in 16 and 17, so I happened to get there right after they missed out on a bowl game. Went 6-6 and didn't qualify they didn't get into a bowl game. So 18 was, we had, I mean, the amount of players that want to play in the NFL at the time, you didn't know that. We had Tyree Jackson, KJ
Yeah.
Osborne, Charlie Jones. I mean, they're just guys that were under recruited. And again, this is what you're asking. This is something. There's so many things that I learned, but looking at a recruit and not thinking, oh, like he's a 5-star, he's a 4-star, he's a 3-star, because that is great and all on paper. But can you take a 2-star and make him a 4-star with your development process? And Coach Leipold he's doing the same thing at Kansas. He's not basing his recruiting probably off of what 24/7 is saying that he should go recruiting. He's trusting his process, his evaluation process, and bringing guys in under Matt Gildersleeve, who's an incredible strength coach too, and getting those guys to a point where, oh wow, where was this kid? Why didn't we recruit that kid? Well, he's changed since being in the program at Buffalo or being in the program at Kansas or
Hmm.
Whitewater. That's the developing and the evaluation part that I think he is just a elite in. And so there's a lot that I learned, but those two things specifically, just his recruiting process, how he evaluates, but then the people in the building and holding of people accountable, making sure that we're also thinking ahead. Did we think of, you know, what if this goes wrong? Having a backup plan um, kept you on your toes
Yeah.
and made you and made everyone else around you better too. So it was that environment was very much a growth environment, and being able to be home and work for Coach Leipold, who is now doing what he's doing. It's be able to have best of both worlds was a
Yeah.
pretty incredible experience.
Yeah, I bet. I bet he definitely seems like he'd be a hell of a guy to work for and learn from. So I'm
For
sure
sure.
that experience will carry with you the rest of your career. So after Buffalo,
Mhm.
um, you decided to make a trip out west a little bit for a year or two, and ended up west and north, probably one of the
Yeah.
coldest places in the world, but one of the most notarized places or notorious places in college football. Had the chance to coach at North Dakota State. How was
Yeah.
that experience? I mean, that's got to be a pretty special environment and a pretty special experience to be a part of.
So, and I'll just be really transparent because this is just how I am. I was on the last staff at Buffalo, and things didn't work out, just didn't see eye to eye. And I was let go, and had an opportunity I had my contract paid out, and I was like, I'm going to go bet on myself. And I had an opportunity to join the staff at North Dakota State. Um, David Braun, who's now the head coach at Northwestern. Um, you know, one of the most selfless individuals ever that I've ever met. He I connected with him through a mutual connection, got on the phone twice, was like, I want to work for that guy. And so I thought about it, had conversations with family, girlfriend, and wound up taking a leap of faith, essentially. It really was it for me. Because I was kind of like, what's next? Like, where am I going? Like, I'm
Hmm.
home. Like, this is the best. There's not a job in Buffalo better than this one than the Buffalo Bills. You know, the
Right.
Buffalo Bills was the only way up. So
Right.
I was like, you know, the opportunity, if I could learn how they do things at North Dakota State, will be invaluable for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
So I told him, listen, I'll come out there, work for technically free on the dime of Buffalo because they're paying me through June, July anyway. So if you want the free help, I'd love to come out and work for you. And he talked to Coach Entz, Matt Entz, and gave me the green light. So I drove out there. Had a flat tire about 3 hours out and barely made it in a snowstorm.
Jeez.
But it was a story for the books. 26 hours, I think it was 26-hour drive total. But Fargo is a special place, special people. Reason why there's been the consistent success for the last however many years. I mean, 9 of the last 12 national championships. I mean, I don't know if there's a dynasty at any level that is as successful as North Dakota State. And the town takes football seriously. I mean, you'd think we were down in Alabama. I mean, it is go to the gas station, people know who you are, even if you're on the support staff.
Hmm.
Um, back to, kind of when I got there, I was brought on in defense, working with Coach Braun, kind of giving him an offensive perspective. Uh, just to speak on how selfless he is, he gave me half of his office. He gave me a part of his office as the defensive coordinator because there
Wow.
wasn't enough room. And a relationship that is still very strong. But so he asked me like what my goals were, and I told him like I'm a receivers guy at heart. I'd love to work with the receivers at some point, and within like the week, I was moved over to the offense and moved over to the receivers because he knew that that was going to help me and get me to where I wanted to go with my career.
Hmm.
And so worked with Noah Pauly, who's the receivers coach at Iowa State now, and learned a ton from him just about how to run a room, how to relate to your kids, how to talk and communicate with your players and not yell. I mean, the guy's just phenomenal. So Coach Entz, the head coach, who's now at USC, he gave me the opportunity to jump over, work for Noah. And, I guess to answer your question about why there's success, it's the people. I mean, hands down, everyone says it, but just people care about each other. People have each other's backs. The the passing down of, going from um, Craig Bowl to Chris Kleinman to Matt Entz, everyone was on the staff prior. Like everyone knew the process. Like
Hmm.
there's a certain process that goes on at NDSU, and maintaining that process is what's kept it for so long. And last year didn't pan out how they wanted to, and
Yeah.
the year and a half I was there, we lost in the national title game. South Dakota State's rolling, good for them.
Yeah.
But if you count on North Dakota State out, you're wrong. Like
Yeah. Right.
what they have going on right now with the new indoor is better than any FBS school that I've seen or stepped on campus. They have the things to get it done. I'm just waiting to see when they actually go FBS, because it is an FBS program that just
Yeah.
is uh that is under that FCS title. But yeah, anything you want to know about North Dakota State, I'd love to answer for you, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you did a pretty good job, obviously. I mean, it's you hear about it and you see it. I know, they had a game day there a few years
Yeah,
ago, and
you did.
I like to watch any sort of football, so I'll pop on FCS games and
Mhm.
catch them, and they're still doing, I feel like they still do it the old school way with when they're like I see clips of them, they're always running some variation of power that looks like it's from the 1980s, but they're still
Yeah,
killing people with it. And so it's obvious so that they have that process there, and that they really believe in that brotherhood as not just within the team, but with how they hire and things like that, because they're always bringing North Dakota State guys back into the fold to be part of that program, because it's obviously they want people that understand how it works up there to keep that rolling.
100%. And like the one thing that you reminded me of something specific that's very important about North Dakota State is it's player led, and there's
Mm.
just such a standard from the players and then the alumni that come back and then maintain it. Like my first month there, my first day there, Coach Hentz we had a run, a morning run, went to the morning run. He kind of walked me around and just talked to me. And, we were watching our players and like players holding each other accountable to a standard I've never seen ever in 8 years of coaching. I remember Cody Mock, who's the guard for the Bucks now, tall, red hair, no two teeth in the front of his face. You probably see
Yep.
him on ESPN. I watched him chewing some guy out for not touching the line, when he could have let it slide. I was like, oh wow, like that's that's pretty cool, because now they can, if that can happen, and then the kid getting chewed out doesn't flinch and he understands it for a
Right.
bigger purpose. Okay, now you're in a good culture that understands
Yeah.
that, okay, it's bigger than me, no matter if I get offended or not, like I
Yeah.
got to go touch the line. And so I think Coach Kramer, though, the strength coach, is probably the glue that keeps that place together for the last however many years, because he's never left. In the
Mm.
strength program, the development, 2 first-round draft picks, quarterbacks, however many linemen over the last however many years. The strength program is by far none. Like he's elite. He's very, very good at what he does. And then the last thing about North Dakota State, really, like Matt Entz, who just went to go to USC, he and how he led the program when I was there, and guys like Tyler Roll, who's the coordinator, they just care about people. Like they truly ask questions and they listen. And just seeing that happen at a program that's won 9 national titles, I did not think that was going on in the building. I thought like it
Mm-hmm.
was just very transactional because they're winning, and I was so wrong. And it's now Tyler Rose at Iowa State with Noah Pauley as the running backs coach. Couldn't be happy for him. But talk
Yep.
about it. I mean, just really great people to be around, and I was fortunate for that. And it's been really cool to see all those guys get opportunities, whether it's Dave at Northwestern,
Mm-hmm.
or Coach Henson. But good things happen to good people, and I'm really, really happy that I had a chance to work with those guys there.
Right. And it shows as some of those guys have gone to different places, they're having success at those places.
Mhm.
And you got to attribute that success, I feel, to what they, at least some of it, to what they learned and took away from North Dakota State. And now they're applying to whatever respective program they're with. So,
Mhm.
I mean, as we talk about this, it's obvious you've had the ability, had the opportunities to coach at a lot of different places. Some guys don't get that. Some guys end up at really good programs early and they stay there for a big portion of their career. Obviously, you've kind of worked your way through different experiences, different levels, things like that. What are some of the biggest, or what would you say is the biggest benefit of having coached at multiple stops? What is a drawback to you, from your experiences, what have you gained through that? And then is there ever a party that wishes like, maybe I wish I had been somewhere, I wish I had a little bit more stability at a certain school at any point in time?
I think that there's so much value in being at all different levels. Right now, coaching Division 3, love it. Great people. I have a great room of guys that want to learn. Um, the love of the game is different, I believe, at Division 3. Like these guys truly love it. There's been guys that I coached at Buffalo that didn't love it. They were on scholarship and they were incredibly talented,
All right.
uh, God given, and so being a Division 3 player and having the opportunity to climb up and experience those things and be around different people in different environments, I've been able to get a unique perspective on just college football in general, like the landscape of like, okay, recruiting processes for Coach Leipold compared to Matt Entz, compared to Chris Douglas, who Chris had nothing besides gravel parking lots and a football field. How do you take that mentality of relationships and recruiting relationships and apply it at the FBS level? Right?
Hmm.
How do you make and build the relationships with Division 1 players so that you stand out from the rest of the coaches that are trying to recruit them? How do you ask the questions? How do you ask the powerful questions that kind of get a kid to go, oh wow, like he's actually done his research on me,
Hmm.
right? Uh, that's that's one of the many things that I think going from Division 3, whether it was at McMurray, Concordia under Kiernan and Ari, I just think that I had to do a lot of different hats, whether it was paint the field, whether it was do inventory on equipment, um, whether it was, having to jump your school van because
Hmm.
that's what you had to take recruiting, just understanding that you, there's different levels to this game of football, but when it boils down to it, like it's about relationships, no matter whether you're at Division 3, JUCO,
Yeah.
or at FBS. And I, in the last 2, 3 years, have really, um, I think the drawback that you're talking about, and if I can go back and change one thing, I think for a while I chased a logo.
Hmm.
What I mean by that is I think when I was at Buffalo, not that I shouldn't have stayed there as long as I did, but there was times where I had an opportunity to go take something that would have been great for my growth, where I could have let a room again. But I think I was riding, the wave of I'm at an FBS school that just won,
Yeah.
the Bahama Bowl.
Right.
I'm going to land somewhere big, right? And
Yeah.
but when you get caught up in all that, you miss out on why you even got into it in the first place. And so through trial and tribulation, through getting let go, really, and then landing at North Dakota State and seeing like the passion and still seeing that like small school vibe of the coaches that I was working with there, like, wow, these guys like don't like care about that stuff. Like they
Hmm.
care about their families, they care about the people being in the building that they care about. Like open door policy for families there too. That was amazing. Just we work long hours, having your family around, getting to know everyone. Uh, but I guess what I'm trying to get at for the drawback is I wish I would have taken steps that would have been a little more uncomfortable sooner. I was in a comfortable situation. I knew the GA spot.
Yeah.
Go take 3 receiver room because you get to impact people.
Yeah.
Like I got in, I really, to answer your first question, probably I got into this because I wanted to impact and empower kids. I wanted to impact and empower people because that's what happened to me. So, the drawback for me would be, I think early on in my career, because I was a Division 3 guy and I got to the FBS level, I didn't want to go back, but
Hmm.
I didn't understand that the experience of coaching in itself and being able to impact kids is what you're doing it for.
Yeah.
So when I fell kind of on my face, to be honest with you, with getting let go of Buffalo, I was like I don't know. I had to like have a really hard, reflection with myself about like, what are we doing this for? And that since that moment, this is, and then being here at Brockport, man, I love every day. I get to show up to work. I get to do what I love, and be around kids that
Well, they
love
always say
to
if
coach.
you're doing something you love, you never work a day in your life, right?
No, 100%. And I just, if for any young coaches out there that are fortunate enough to climb the ranks and get to an FBS GA spot, don't get stuck in the facade that you're never going to be able to get back up there,
Hmm.
because it's all about relationships and staying in touch with the people that you know, and go coach a room, go empower kids. You do a great job at it, and you do a good job, and you network well enough, and you made a lasting impact on enough people, you're going to get another opportunity. But I just wish I would have done it probably sooner. That's my only probably drawback, is take a leap of faith a little bit sooner than I did.
Gotcha. Well, to wrap it up, I always like to ask,
Hmm.
for you, you've been at Brockport, you've been around, been a receivers coach now for a little while. And I know right now you're focusing on being the best coach you can be at Brockport, right? And working with those
Yeah.
guys. But, taking that aside or kind of taking a step back, what would you like to do next? Is it be a coordinator? Is it move back up to a higher level? What does forward progress look like for you moving forward?
No, that's a great question. I actually have I have a girlfriend, not that she makes fun of me, she doesn't, but like I have these goal boards on in my office. A someday goal, a 5-year goal. For me, like someday I want to coach in the NFL. I want to be a receivers coach in the NFL. I
Hmm.
want to, and that's a someday goal. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if I don't put it on paper, in my opinion, it doesn't have a chance. And it just, I'm happy where I'm at right now. Whenever it would happen, probably be, to move up into a scholarship receiver coach job. I don't have any aspirations to go anywhere anytime soon, but the next step for my progress would probably be, whether it be a FCS, FBS receivers coach. I really have I would love to get into running a quarterback room. That's mine. And I feel like having conversations as of late with coaches is what's the next step to be a coordinator? How do you, put yourself in that position of coaching quarterbacks? I think that would be a really challenging and great opportunity for my development in case I would want to coach and be a coordinator.
Hmm.
Right now, right now the goal is to just master the fundamentals and coach the hell out of the receivers all the way up to the NFL. But we'll see what happens. I'm not really in control of that. God's got that one.
Yeah, for sure. Just bloom where you're planted, right?
100%, man. The grass isn't always greener. It's greener when you
No.
water it.
Yep, for sure. That's a great way of looking at it, right? That's a as true statement as it can be. But well, Mike, I really appreciate it, man. It was a great talk. It was some really good insight there. So I thank you again for coming on and spending some time talking with me. I know it's a busy time for you. When do you guys start your spring ball?
So we start up on March 25th. So
Okay.
we'll have spring break, and then guys will come back, and guys are hungry. Guys are itching. They're coming in the office already, and they're like, as good as it is that it starts after spring break, I think guys have been in the weight room for so many
Yeah.
weeks now that, can we get to some football? So
Yeah.
it's I'm excited to get rolling and get back to the fundamentals. And uh, yeah, it's going to be a great opportunity, and hopefully this weather stays as nice as it's been in
Yeah,
Brockport.
right.
It's been like 50, it's been
It's a little
55
too
and
good to be
sunny.
true.
Yeah, I'm knocking on wood right now because it'll be snowing like crazy over the next couple weeks with what I just said. So
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Well, awesome, man. Thanks again. Really appreciate it. And we'll get you guys another time on Forward Progress. Have a good night.
awesome. Appreciate it.